Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Disability Tech Talk featuring Alex Dunn, founder and CEO of Cephable. I'm Jocelyn Cohen, Vice President of Communications and Engagement with Cerebral Palsy Alliance Research Foundation, or CPARF for short. This event is closed caption enabled, and I've turned on transcription. It's also being recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel soon. For additional accessibility, I'll share a visual description of myself. I'm a white woman with dark brown shoulder-length hair that's down and brown eyes. I'm wearing large teal glasses and a green sweater. There's a CPARF-related background behind me that's white and different hues of green, and sometimes I may look like my eyes are looking away from the screen or like they're rolling, but that's part of my cerebral palsy. In case this is your first online event with us, I'd like to tell you a bit about what CPARF does. Despite being the world's most common lifelong physical disability and affecting 18 million people worldwide, cerebral palsy is one of the most overlooked and underfunded conditions. That's why CPARF funds research and innovative technology that will change what it's like to live with cerebral palsy. We run Remarkable US, the US-based disability tech startup accelerator that's part of the global Remarkable Accelerator program. And through seed funding, mentorships, deep dives, and support during this initiatives, we help startups bring affordable, life-changing technology one step closer to the people with disabilities who need it. Because the world isn't built for disabled people. Thankfully, there are companies that place disability at the forefront, and Remarkable US is working with them. They're built to fill in gaps, meet crucial needs, and make accessibility accessible. Cephable, a member of our 2023 cohort, is one such company. Alex Dunn founded it under a different name with a different purpose and has grown it to give disabled people more control than ever over the technology that shapes their lives. Alex was named to the Forbes 30 Under 30 Boston list earlier this year, and he is an inductee of the Game Awards Future class for his work on Cephable to make gaming more inclusive. Most recently, he was awarded the Stephen Salee Award of Excellence from the state of North Carolina. I'm so excited to chat with him tonight, and as I mentioned earlier, you can leave questions for him in the Q&A, and we'll get to as many as we can. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you so much for having me. What an intro. Oh my gosh. I'm so flattered.
You're welcome. Those are your flowers for the, you'll get a lot more throughout the night because you've done a lot. So to start things off though, can you tell us more about yourself and your professional background?
Yeah, so I'm Alex Dunn, founder and CEO of Cephable. Visual description, I'm a late 20s white man with brown hair. I'm wearing a red, white, black, and yellow flannel, and I've got a background of a whole bunch of books and watches and plaques and stuff like that. So sort of on the professional side and career side, I spent most of my career after dropping out of college in software engineering and applied artificial intelligence, really in sort of the enterprise space. I've run some startups, some that have been pretty successful, some that haven't. I've worked in consulting for really sort of focus in the Fortune 500 space and led teams in mobile application engineering, application development, and then most recently, prior to starting Cephable, was the chief product officer at an AI company called Voicify, which is a SaaS platform for building voice assistants. Some that you might be using and not even know that it was sort of our tech back there. And then really sort of pivoted into the assistive tech and accessibility space to apply my background towards real human problems, and kind of got started with that to focus on a single member of my family and solving his problems first.
I appreciate hearing about your path. Like, no one really takes a straight path in life, and it's so fascinating to hear different decisions and choices and pivots, and how, one thing led to another, led to something else, and that ultimately led to you helping your family member, which may or may not have been something that was guiding you when you started, but here you are with this really fantastic technology. And you started to talk about this, obviously, that your family member motivated you to start Cephable, but what specifically happened? What was that real catalyst, or was it a few different things that happened?
Yeah, to me, I think realistically, there's probably a few different things, but to me, there's kind of like an opportunity and catalyst moment where basically I went home to visit my family back in Christmas 2019, so right before the pandemic really hit. And my brother's disability affects especially his dexterity in his hands, and he also has autism. And so I basically was observing him trying to play games like Minecraft and Roblox with his friends online, having a hard time sort of keeping pace with both, his friends or with my other siblings, because there's a vast amount of us. I'm the third of seven, and he's my youngest brother is what I'm talking about. He's 15 years younger than me.
Okay.
Um, and so watch that sort of turn into falling behind a little bit, and the falling behind kind of evolving into being left out. And that was frustrating for me, especially around gaming, but also seeing it in sort of his work in school and everything else too, with kind of really dissecting that problem and realizing that the challenge he faced was just with buttons on a game controller, like pressing enough buttons fast enough and doing sequences fast enough, in the way that his disability impacted that pace, the way that it didn't impact others, was really what I sort of looked at as like that was the sort of core problem, and a source of frustration for him. And so through the pandemic, I was stuck at home a whole bunch, and I'd started this research on different ways of creating controls with other types of inputs that aren't physical switches, aren't physical buttons, because those things exist and ultimately weren't solutions for him either. And so I started streaming on Twitch, and working on projects to turn voice and face and other sorts of virtual inputs into ways to play games. I was originally called Project Suave Keys because my online handle is Suave Pirate Everywhere. There's a whole long story behind that.
Oh, screen names, they all have a history.
Oh yeah, exactly. I've stuck with it to this day. It's even my LinkedIn URL is like linkedin.com/in/suave pirate.
Oh,
It's so I started streaming and working on these projects, using it as an opportunity also to teach people how to code and like take concepts and turn them into products, which is a big passion of mine. And what sort of came out of that was a whole bunch of really hacky projects that not just my brother got to try and provide some validation and continue to sort of build with him in that, but also other people caught on to it and wanted to try it and brought ideas of how to evolve it. And ultimately that led to a whole sequence of things that became what we used to be called, which was enabled play, which was used to be a physical black controller that was just a black box you could plug into a game console or to a computer, and then they'd use our mobile app for all these controls. Yeah, that's sort of the catalyst and the waterfall that came after that, which was a whole lot of time and a whole lot of interest in digging into the problem and creating solutions.
it's so rare that people end up with the concentrated time like we had. And, I would rather have not had it, but it's great to hear that you did something really powerful with it.
Yeah, it was definitely it was an opportune time, and I think there's always going to be situations where challenges present opportunities, and I think
Yeah.
COVID was one of those for me personally.
Yeah, I totally get that. You mentioned that you started sort of with a different goal and a different name than Able to Play. So what exactly prompted the changes after all of that work?
Yeah, so from the beginning, with my brother and sort of not just observing him in games, but also him trying to do his homework online and things like that, sort of a lot of that was sort of backseated originally, and the focus really was on making play more equitable and leveling the playing field in the digital gaming world. But what sort of happened from there is I started to talk more about it and share more and had more people using it, is people started to use it for just a lot of other things. We had people starting to use it in schools, and we had departments of education at different states start reaching out about how to apply the technology to support their students with disabilities in participating in STEM programs and computer science classes and digital arts and design classes and things like that. We also had people sharing stories of how they were using it at work and for their productivity. And so it very quickly turned into a like, whoa, there's way bigger challenges that we're kind of accidentally creating a solution for.
Mhm.
And in a lot of ways, starting in gaming, I think, was a blessing because it forced us to focus so much on like performance and privacy and speed and adaptability and flexibility, because every game is so different. It's not just like typing keys on a keyboard, it's
Right.
different configurations of using those same keys or buttons on a gamepad. And that level of flexibility and configuration ultimately opens more doors. And so that was sort of the original start of that snowball. And then I think the bigger one is we started having bigger enterprises reach out to us, and that you might have seen a video on LinkedIn or on YouTube or on Reddit of someone sharing what they were using enabled play at the time for. And then reached out to like, hey, we want to use this for our employees, or we think there's an opportunity to use these types of controls within our apps or within our games to make them more accessible and reach a broader audience of people with disabilities as their customers. And that was I think the real moment where we're like, okay, our cute little tiny playful childish octopus logo and our cute little name and all of our stuff being focused around gaming accessibility, like we kind of have to step up and do more and represent more and be more. And so that was what kind of created the change and pivot into Cephable, and even the way that we actually do our business and go to market, and how we build our software is kind of built around that.
That's so wonderful. Again, it goes back to the pivot thing that I brought up earlier, where you never know where one choice is then going to bring you later on. And like, you don't
Exactly.
know what choices you make today, where that's going to bring you in a week or a month or a year. And it's so fantastic to hear that all these different types of entities were reaching out to you and seeing the potential and the power that your technology had. It's a rarity, I think,
Yeah.
honestly. So you've talked a lot about Cephable, but what distinguishes it from other products in the market? Is it what you were just talking about, or other things in addition to that?
Oh boy. There's a lot of things, and I could
Go
probably
for
spend the whole hour talking about it, but I'll
it.
talk about, because okay, for some context, right? Cephable as a platform in some ways is multiple assistive technologies kind of bundled into one.
Okay.
So in and of itself, that kind of makes it a little unique. There's within each one of those, there are specific things that we do differently that make us unique. For example, comparing us to a tool or a platform like Dragon Naturally Speaking versus like Cephable voice controls and dictation. We provide out of the box ways to generate automatic macros and controls using our AI. So instead of having to go manually configure a whole bunch of macros like you would with Dragon, you can go to Cephable and say, like, I want Microsoft Word with voice controls and I want shortcuts for these things. Please go. As a matter of fact, you can even use Cephable to write that into Cephable
I
and
love it.
use voice controls and dictation that way. But we also, in the world of voice, which again, like my background was really focused in for the last 8 years or so, create a focus in adaptive voice controls. And so learning about an individual's voice patterns and their abilities and using them and leaning into them versus trying to create really broad speech recognition models that ultimately and typically exclude people with disabilities from being able to use them. The big ones, Google's baseline speech recognition, Amazon Alexa, like all of these sort of, and Dragon, like if you have a speech impairment or have minimal speech abilities, they're not going to work for you. And we wanted to change that from the very beginning. And so even for folks that are typically nonverbal but can make sound, we can even empower them to use those abilities and make those sounds and turn them into something that they want to, without having to spend hours and hours recording things and building this bespoke speech model for yourself. It's really sort of more natural in the way that it works behind the scenes. That's all
That's
just on the voice
so,
side.
I mean, I have to just jump in that the idea that someone who's nonverbal but can make sounds can then be able to use technology to otherwise communicate when basically everything else has not worked for them up until that point. That is unbelievable. I didn't realize that was a feature of Cephable. So thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that. And I'll let you continue, but that just like really moved me. So I wanted to pause.
There's literally just a switch you can turn on. We call it optimistic mode in voice controls that like immediately makes it start like working for the voice controls that you want to use within your speech abilities. And so I can also like show you some more of that later on.
Yeah,
And like
that was
we
the
can show you
next
like
thing
the
I was going to
difference when you
ask,
turn on.
but
Yeah.
yeah.
So I think the other major difference is how we create that access and how we actually provide access to our platform. So for individuals, our platform's free. All of it is free. 100% of it is free. You pay for nothing. There's no freemium model where you get some of it for free and then you pay more. Like you can go
Right.
download the app. You can go to cephable.com. You can download Cephable. You can generate as many controls as you want. You can use any of the keyboard and mouse automation stuff that we do. Like you can use voice controls. You can use face expression controls. All of it's just there for free. Ultimately, like what we do versus trying to sell through, whether it be, through insurance providers or through medical providers or through Medicare and things like that in the US, or even like to individuals in the market and this sort of direct to consumer market, is we work with businesses, and ultimately we make our money in a business to business model, a B2B model, where businesses integrate our controls into their applications. But the cool thing is, like, that also means that people who are using Cephable's controls also will find the applications that we're integrated into and support that they want to be able to use and previously weren't able to. So that's where we also help sort of bridge that gap of whether it's a game I've always wanted to play, or the bank that I've been trying to use independently but haven't been able to because of accessibility issues on their side. We can sort of be that glue and that gap for both the users and the businesses that are ultimately trying to just do more and be more accessible.
That's wonderful. And it also is a testament to those businesses to recognize the huge untapped market of disabled people in this country.
Yeah.
So kudos to them for being forward thinking along with you. And you mentioned you could show us some of the things that Cephable does. So I'd love if you would share your screen and do that.
Yes,
I'm really
I'd love
excited
to.
to see it in action. I've heard so much about it.
Okay, hold on. Let me get my screen share up and
Okay.
do all of it the right way. This desktop. Cool. All right. Well, here's our platform. This is I'm on a Mac, but you can also do the same thing on Windows. And you can also download the companion app on iOS and Android, just in the App Store and Play Store. There's kind of two core concepts to wrap your head around with how to use Cephable. One is what we call control profiles. And this is where you create different sets of controls for what you're trying to do. And I'll show you how we generate those and stuff too. When you have a control profile, and I'll jump into one that we made earlier. So I've got this like Microsoft Word for Mac one because I'm on a Mac. I can go in to edit this profile and I can see all the different things that I have. Like if I say open file, it will do a keyboard shortcut to open a file, Command O, on my Mac. I've also got things like head movement to control my cursor. So I can tilt my head up, down, left, and right to move basically the same as the arrow keys to move my cursor around. I could also say delete, or I could take my phone and shake it with the Cephable app in motion controls to delete things too, which is always a fun one. You can like rage quit what you just wrote and what's like an Etch-a-Sketch. And all these shortcuts that actually were generated. So I didn't have to even go in here and like set up so that I have Command save or Command S for save by saying it. These were all generated using Cephable's AI. And so what I can do is I can go in and create a new control profile. And I'm going to use our little Cephy here to generate one. Okay. So let's pick an app, just an app on your desktop that you might want to control. Anything. It could be a game. It could be a productivity tool. Like, what would you want to control with Cephable's controls?
I mean, I use Google Docs, but that's not on my desktop, right? That doesn't really.
That's fine. We can do Google Docs. Okay. Totally. Okay. And let's say we want to use voice controls, and we'll use head movement. And then we could check all of these, but I'll do face expressions and virtual buttons. And we could stop there and we can hit generate and it'll do stuff. But what's really cool is we can also describe more specifically how we want this to work. So for example, if we wanted like what we had in that Microsoft Word one, where tilting my head will move the arrow keys to move the cursor, we can tell it to do that. So make sure I can tilt my head for the arrow keys. I could also say other things like make sure there are voice shortcuts for common editing tasks. And there has to be a virtual button for saving. And then I can go ahead and just hit generate. Okay. And so this can take up to about a minute. Usually it's around like 15 to 20 seconds, but sometimes it takes longer. Sometimes it tries to do too much and we just have to tell it to sort of go through it. So we help people sort of see tips and stuff in real time here on the side. I'll also mention
smart use of a captive audience.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we're done. We can now go see our controls. And now we can go ahead and look at what we generated. So we've got a profile for Google Docs. And we can see if I say up or if I tilt my head back, so again, I look up towards the ceiling, then it'll be the same as the up arrow. So same stuff we just saw in the other profile, down, left, right, all that good stuff. We've got our control B. In this case, I didn't tell it to do it for Mac, so it's going to default to our Windows controls because that's what most of our users are using.
Mhm.
Make bold text, or just saying bold, or if I raise my eyebrows, which was cool. So it also recognized that bold is a common shortcut that we're going to need. And it took a common face expression that users will also use. So if you're using just face controls, you could also now use a head mouse to type on a virtual keyboard, and you could raise your eyebrows up in order to make the text that you selected bold. Italic, underline, copy, paste, open your mouth to copy, close your mouth to paste, which actually this just unlocked a really cool use case where I can open my mouth, leave it open, move my cursor to where I want to paste it to, and then close my mouth to paste it.
Oh, wow.
That was all just automatically generated from the AI, plus all these other things: undo, redo, new document, all that fun stuff. And so with these controls, I will save and exit because we want it. We can now start our voice controls and our expression controls. But before we do that, one of the things I wanted to share was how we turn on that like optimistic mode.
Yes.
So in voice control, there's two settings: automatically start voice control. So if you're a voice control user and you don't want to have to, like, you open up your laptop or you turn on your computer, like your control should be there running for you. So if you're a voice control user, you can turn this on. So when you turn on your computer, your voice controls run right away.
Got it.
Optimistic controls is a whole long write up here, but I'll give you the sort of short version.
Okay.
Is we take the big giant speech recognition model that has an over 99% accuracy rate out of the box, running entirely offline. So whether you're not connected to the internet at all, or even just for your own privacy's sake, your audio never leaves your computer. We take that all that vocab and stuff that it learns, and we actually compress it down to whatever, I'll leave without saving, whatever controls you have in your profile. So in this case, we got all sorts of voice controls for open file, new file, all these things that we were generating and changing and editing ourselves. And so we take that vocab and then we take your actual speech and we basically try to like find the closest matching thing that you're trying to do. And we learn that over time anyway. So we start to like get smarter as you use it, and it adapts to your speech pattern. But it's an optimistic mode. We basically like really focus in and use those controls, which means it's great for folks that are trying to use a few inputs and just want them to be really, really fast, right? So for gamers, this is really useful, even if they don't have any limited speech. If someone has a speech impairment and they want to be able to use all sorts of controls, this can help sort of round out those edges immediately without having to wait for it to learn your abilities. In expression settings, where we pop open our head controls, which I'll just do so you can kind of see the visual side as well.
Okay.
Pops open this little overlay window in the top right. You'll start to see it tracking face lines and stuff like that. For me, again, entirely offline. So my camera is not streaming anywhere. I can disconnect from the internet. Of course, I would fall off of this meeting, but I can run this offline. Your videos never streamed. It looks like it's trying to pick up another face in my reflection from one of my pieces of glass up there too, which is pretty funny. And so one of the things that we do with expression controls is we can do things like track head tilting, turning, which you can see it's starting to show those detections over there in the top right. But also your mouth movement, eyebrow raises, like I seem to be doing, because that's just my natural way of speaking. I have very expressive eyebrows, but you can actually control the level of sensitivity for each one. So if you have limited mobility in a specific movement, so let's say head tilting up, right? So that's looking to up towards the ceiling. I can increase the sensitivity here. And on the higher side of your sensitivity, it's teeny tiny, like micro movements. It's less than a degree of change. So things like the head movement I'm doing now would be considered head tilt up. Of course, I'd have to save it here. You can control that sensitivity for any given movement. So not just like overall sensitivity. So if I can tilt my head to the left, you can actually see it starting to change because it's doing the left arrow and it's actually changing the sensitivity as I'm doing it. If I'm using that control for left and I can't move left as far as I can right, I can change the sensitivities too. But for folks on the sort of further end of that spectrum with, I'm going to pause this so it stops doing things in the background. For folks on the other end of that spectrum of mobility and for folks with spasticity in their movement, you can decrease the sensitivity. So you're not getting all these like false positive triggers and things like that. Stuff that are often, really big challenges with eye tracking devices, head tracking devices, is that like I've got movement in and I can't control that movement. I'm getting a lot of things firing that shouldn't be. So you can decrease the sensitivity so that I can have to get to that sort of further intentional movement, in this case of this head tilt up, to get it to trigger. But it's about that level of flexibility and change for any given movement. Also, some fun things in here. We have things like head mouse, where you can just turn on, use head movement for mouse movements versus these types of controls. So instead of moving the arrow keys like I have in the Word profile, it'll actually like move my mouse up, down, left, right, and I can change which kind of movement I want for that as well.
You mentioned a virtual button before. It's one of the things you picked on your list. What is that? Have we landed there yet?
Yes.
Did I accidentally miss
Yes.
it?
No. Here, you know
Okay.
what? This might take me just a second, but I'm gonna actually plug in my phone to my computer
Okay.
and share my phone screen so you can see it. Because it's really most useful for using with a phone or a tablet.
Okay.
Because essentially it lets you take your phone or tablet and turn it into a whole bunch of switches and buttons that you can press, virtual buttons, on your screen. So for example, in this Microsoft Word profile, and I'm going to open up Visor, which is the app I use to show my phone screen now that I've plugged my phone in. So I can do this. Okay, now left side over here, this is my phone. So if I like, move my fingers, move my phone screen, I can go to my Mac because that's what I'm controlling right now. And I can see that it's connected, meaning that I can use my phone and communicate to my desktop, including actually using my phone's camera. So I can use virtual buttons, motion controls, and expression controls from my phone. So if I tap virtual buttons, this profile has a lot of different buttons. So things like bold, italic, uppercase, stuff like that. I'm going to just pull up a sample Word doc over here. And for example, if I click on this word and then I tap the B button from my phone, it makes it bold because that's my shortcut for bold, or italic, or underline, and I can unbold it and I can copy it, and I can save my file, and all those by just tapping these buttons that are specifically for this profile. Cool thing about virtual buttons though is they fill the space with however many you add. So if you have a tablet, like if you have an iPad, this many buttons, they're all going to be like 1.5 by 1.5 inches, which is really useful. Not as useful in this phone screen size, but if I have one button, it will fill the entire screen. So now I've got my entire phone screen as like a single switch that I could use.
And you can touch it anywhere. And when you have less dexterity in your hand, that's really important.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow.
So you combine that with face controls plus voice controls plus any other input or device that you're also using alongside it, and you get a lot of flexibility in a platform that's learning about you and making it easier for you over time.
Thank you for demonstrating all of that. It was awesome to see it all in action because, like I said, I've heard so much, but I haven't seen it doing its thing. And I could see its origins, like why it started, how it started in kind of game mode, and then how people were like, oh, this could really help me in my work life or in these other things that I'm doing, and sort of hacked it in the very adaptable spirit of the disability community. And we ended up here. So that's fantastic.
Exactly. One last thing in terms of demoing, because it's
Yeah.
it's our joy and our play that we do when we're introducing people to the platform. And if you check out any of our tutorials and you go through that process, you'll find it too. But using your first Cephable control, whether it be face, which I'll show you in a minute, tapping a button, or using a voice control to play a one button game like tap shots. And I've been challenged by some folks on my team to try to get a new high score today on tap shots live.
Okay.
And so just to sort of give you the full picture of using Cephable, I've got my face expressions controls, which are paused. I'm going to switch my profile to a tap shots profile, which has one input. I say up, or I open my mouth and it does a click, right? And so now I have that profile set. If I resume my voice controls, or my expression control, sorry, then I should be able to do. Oh, wait, let me turn my lines back on. And I got to restart this because I didn't actually set it. Set, start, move from my other window over here. So I've got multiple screens. I'll make it bigger too so folks can see it because I'm on a pretty big monitor. Come on, expression controls. There we go.
Oh, that was so close. There you go.
Oh, no. Oh, okay. Well, I got 2, and my score is 24. So
That was a valiant
Did something.
effort.
Yeah, it was an attempt. We'll call it that.
Yeah. Also, that game reminds me of like 80s arcade games that were out. There's just such a
Yeah.
retro font and everything, so I appreciate that. Someone's asking, just before I move through the rest of my questions, someone has a really great question, which is what excites you the most about the Cephable platform?
Oh my gosh. What excites me the most, honestly, like the reason I get up in the morning is working with our users and learning what's working for them and also what's not, and continuing to make it better. So what excites me the most is when we either get emails or people post in our community pages on like Facebook or Discord and share what made a difference for them, and what they are now playing, or what they're doing at work, or what they're doing at school that they weren't able to before. That's not necessarily a feature or function. That's the thing that excites me most. And then in terms of like functionality, it's the things to come that are always the most exciting for me. I'm always reaching for that next feature or function, whether it be new types of things that we can detect with our computer vision models, or new ways to apply speech and automation in intelligent ways. Those are the things that get me the most excited.
Thank you for sharing that, and to the person who asked that question.
Yeah, keep the questions coming. I definitely I
So
love it. Happy to
yeah,
jump.
I mean, I have other questions also, but I would love to hear what attendees have burning questions about. So, making accessibility accessible and affordable is a real driving force behind Remarkable and CPARF's work. How beyond what you've shared so far does Cephable achieve this? You've said a lot about how it's a free to the end user platform, which is fantastic. That is the most affordable you can make anything. But are there any other ways that you're making the accessibility of your product affordable and accessible that we haven't discussed yet?
Yeah, there's so I always the biggest thing is like trying to actually change the way that assistive tech, specifically digital assistive technology, is sort of built and shared in the market, is like our biggest way of doing that. I think more specifically, we're also always continuing and striving for more in advanced accessibility of our platform itself, and working with our users and new users and other folks who have never even heard of Cephable to understand how we can make it better and more accessible on its own, in terms of the actual controls and things like that. The third way is really how we actually work with developers and our business partners, which is trying to also help them create more accessible experiences by including Cephable's controls out of the box, and making it really easy for their users to also use these types of inputs and modalities to interact with their technology. So trying to minimize the level of effort that it takes to add these types of controls, and getting that first step, I'd say, towards real accessibility. We are not a point solution. We'll never claim to be a like drop Cephable in and you're accessible. It's just not
Right.
how it really is. But we do believe that we can help developers of these bigger platforms that our users already want to use access that new level of accessibility and controls without having to build it themselves. Like if you wanted to build adaptive voice controls into your remote as a cable or TV provider, like that's a lot of work, and we can sort of make that quite a bit easier, and also help people connect and access the different platforms that they want, not just the sort of keyboard and mouse stuff.
That's fantastic. Um, okay, someone's asking about more details for the Cephable application. So can multiple people use it on one device with different profiles? Because you showed like there were different profiles, different
Yeah, I can share my screen
machines,
again
different
and
things.
answer that.
Yes, can they use it with different profiles or controls or different voice recognition?
Yes. So a couple things. We don't have like this sort of concept of like quick switching between accounts. All of your personalization is really tied to a user account. So right now we actually like call it out in our onboarding, which I'll like jump to here, where we
Okay.
tie your individual abilities and everything to that account right now. So what devices you're trying to control, this is where we ask, like, is this for you or for someone else? And for example, if I'm like, I want to set up Cephable for someone else, well, then we explicitly ask, like, is
Right.
this
Are
their
you in?
account, like, or is
Yeah.
this your account? Because if it's your account, you should make them an account, and so you have those sort of separated.
Right.
Um, But what you can do very easily, because it is tied to yours, is when a user is done with a given device, you just go sign out and then sign back into a new account. And
Okay.
that's so wipes clean, and then you can just sign in with that person's account on whichever device they want to control. So the cool thing is, especially when we start these sort of discussions on integrating Cephable's controls, not into an individual's like laptop, but like I'm a Cephable user and I want to go use an ATM and I want to control that ATM with my Cephable controls. Well, we're working on ways for ATM builders and banks to basically allow someone to bring their, whether it's a mobile device or some other way to identify to the ATM, my Cephable controls that I've created, and basically like temporarily sign in to use it, which is pretty cool. But because all of it is ultimately tied to your account and your user profile.
Right. So it's like there's some authentication levels in place there.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's great. So I know from your podcast episodes with us that championing disabled perspectives is really important to you. So you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but can you go into more detail about how you've worked in tandem with the disability community and how that's evolved over the lifespan of Cephable?
Yeah, the main thing is, as we've sort of gone from like enable play controllers and all of the origins of it, every step of the way, whether it's even just been my brother or other folks who have started to use it, everything has been done in building with our users. And I think one of the perspectives I have is like there's a lot of focus in this like nothing for us without us, which I am 100% behind. But to me, it's also a little wild that like we have to call that out in the accessibility and disability space, because like that's just how good products are developed. Like people who are building products without including their users, like that blows my mind in the first place. And so a big focus of ours has always been, even when it was just me working on it, a couple of years ago, working with folks who are using it and gathering feedback and sharing new concepts and every step of the way, from early design and concepting through really early alpha builds that are super buggy. And really, I just want to shout out all of our very early users who were part of that adoption life cycle, who struggled through all the bugs and continue to struggle through those bugs when we run those early releases. You're very much appreciated, and the whole community appreciates you. To basically actually talking to our users as they use it. Like ultimately, we're building assistive tech, and assistive tech is built for people with disabilities. We can't be successful in doing that unless people with disabilities actually have their voice in it. Also, our company, 75% of our entire company identifies as having a disability. So we're also a majority disabled company in how we build everything, from how we do our marketing to how we interact with our community, how we actually do our engineering. It takes an entire community to build something like this, and it's always been a part of my product lifecycle development, in understanding what a person's problems are and developing solutions. Like I'm not in the business of developing solutions without problems, because ultimately those don't succeed too.
Right. I mean, as I said earlier, the world isn't built for disabled people, and you can't fix the entire world, but you found a corner of it where you can go in and make a real appreciable difference for people. It's really nice and refreshing to hear, although I do hear this with every remarkable company, so I'm not at all surprised. But it's refreshing to hear in the scheme of things in the country that, you're a majority disabled company, that you've consulted very closely with disabled people from day one, and that you then continue to consult with them, because as I know, just from your experience, disability is not a monolith. One person with CP is one person with CP, one disabled person is one disabled person, and there are 18 million people with CP and a billion disabled people. So knowing that you and your company have the ability to sort of integrate the feedback, take it to heart, not really take it as a criticism, but always as a means for growing, it's really
Yeah,
admirable. And I appreciate that that's the philosophy that you take as you continue to grow your company.
it's really like it's the furthest from taking it as criticism. Like it's there, we appreciate so much when people are really really candid about how their experience is. And it's interesting actually, in this space, one of the things that I've somewhat, I guess, anecdotally experienced is when we create Cephable, so many people are excited about it because it's free and it's great and it works for them in some cases. But some people are often hesitant to criticize it and tell us what's wrong because they're like, we don't want you to feel bad because you're already doing so much and this has helped me so much and all that stuff. But like, we yearn for that, like, where is it not perfect, because we just want to make it perfect in so many different cases, and wherever we can. So it's actually one of the things we're continuing to try to get even better at, and we're trying to operationalize more as we continue to grow. And we go from our first few users to our first million users. Is how do we ensure that no matter what, when we're building for so many different people with different levels of abilities and different ways that they're able to use those abilities, how do we ensure that we don't subsequently leave people behind too, right? How do I make sure that if I introduce a new feature, that it doesn't also remove something else that someone else was relying on, and sort of take this mentality of like, you build for one, and I'm going to quote John Campbell here, who is our director of engineering, who's really been continuing to push this mantra. You build for one, you build for two, you build for five, you build for 10, you build for 50, you build for 1,000, and you go from there. And we're trying to continue to make sure we're continuing to build against that mantra, working with our community and what we're calling our consortium for now, subject to change, but our real champions that are there to give us the real hard cutting feedback and helping us perfect the platform for them and subsequently for others too. And the more diverse that group is, obviously the better over time as well. So we're trying to sort of build this rotating source of folks who are passionate about what we're doing, who use Cephable every day, who use it for different situations, who have different disabilities, have different goals in mind. And making sure that we're always building successfully for them before anything else.
So, I mean, I was going to say this to the end, but it just naturally follows what you were asking, which is if someone wanted to join that consortium, TBD on the name of what it's going to be, like, do they just reach out to, is there a way just on the website, to a general email they can reach out to, that kind of thing? Or not yet, maybe soon.
We're working on an actual like form for it. I don't know if anyone I see a few folks from our team in the attendees, if anyone's got a link to that, if we have it yet. Otherwise, the current way is join the Facebook group for users and or join the Discord and let us know there, because that's where people are sharing a lot of these ideas and their goals and feedback, and also things like sharing the control profiles they make so people get their own copies of those and everything else. And not just our platform, but our community is really strong. So that's probably the best place, is like join our communities online, and share your ideas and how you want to sort of continue to work with us there too.
I am completely unsurprised that the community is sharing their control profiles in the Discord. Like, when we find hacks that work for us, we shout them any way we can, because we don't want anyone else to have to figure it out. Like, if we figured it out and it took us a long time to figure it out, like, here, I'm going to save you time.
Yeah. What's like really wild about that though is so many other like digital accessibility and digital assistive tech products like have no means of doing that. Like, they have no way to just be like, I got this working for me, I need to share this setup with someone else very easily. It was like one of the first things we made. But yeah, like once people learn like, oh, I can share this, 100%, like people are so excited to do that.
I love that.
Yeah,
it's using the internet for all the good things.
Yeah.
You've shared a lot about Cephable. What were some of the biggest challenges you faced when creating it, though?
Okay, I could go in a couple routes here. There's technical challenges, right? So there are things like the amount of data available for things that we need to train like computer vision and speech recognition models for, audio data that's labeled, face data that's labeled, things like that. There's a massive shortage of that's inclusive of people with disabilities, which en masse is kind of scary to think about because everyone else is building their products around that, so those same types of data sets. And so we're thinking about things like computer vision models for people to be able to board an airplane and identify it's using the same data sets in the end. And so if you have a disability that gives you a facial difference and the models aren't inclusive of a way to understand that, like, that's a challenge. And so aggregating that data and then also combining and mixing new data that we gathered from like very early adopters and champions of ours was a challenge. The second thing I'd say, in the early days of Enable Play, when we used to sell those little black boxes, is actually honestly trying to identify and sell in a consumer market, which luckily we don't anymore, right? We went from, we're not going to sell in the consumer market, it's free. But we see it all the time with other assistive tech companies that either go the route of, CMS codes here in the US and FDA approval, and they go through insurance coverage and Medicare, and they become really expensive, which means if you don't get insurance coverage or your doctor doesn't approve, you never get it because they're, thousands of dollars. Or they sell them in a market where people aren't able to spend hundreds to thousands of dollars on these types of devices. And so, for example, we used to sell our old devices for, not at cost with very razor thin margins, mostly because it was also a passion project. And
Right.
we were selling them for $250, which in the world of assistive tech, and what we did was unbelievably cheap. And it was
Right.
like technically considered like super consumer friendly, but ultimately, like, it's still not.
Still $250.
Still $250, yeah, and that's only, like, that's not accessible even here in the US and in Canada and in Western Europe. Never mind some of the other countries where folks are really trying to access and get access to our technology, whereas like $250 is like weeks worth of pay or a month of pay in terms of exchange rate. So it's like out of the question. That was a big challenge, and I'm far happier with our direction now and getting our software to the state where it is, and being in this sort of public beta state with our consumer software, and making that something that's just accessible for no dollar commitments.
I mean, the idea that you're making it essentially globally accessible is huge, really. And you shared some of your wins as well, but like, what's your biggest win after sharing those challenges?
Oh boy,
what's your biggest win?
I don't know that I can name the biggest. Like, I always just go back to like the things that make me just yes, we're doing it, is literally when someone just types in Discord like, I finally got to play this game, or I finally got to like do this thing that I couldn't before. Those straight up, like, I just like, I want to jump, and I just want to like just scream at the top of my lungs of how excited I am.
Do you print them out like analog and frame them?
I do. I save them to a folder. I'm like, when you're feeling bad, go to this.
This is the uplifting folder. Here you go. Screenshot it. That's fantastic. It's honestly some of the little victories are some of the biggest ones, really, and they resonate the most. So I completely understand why you would say that. You've again talked about the kinds of people that use Cephable, but who are your ideal customers? So we know who the users are who are able to get the Cephable for free, but who are your ideal customers, those industries we were alluding to a bit earlier?
Yeah, so we really focus in the enterprise space in consumer applications and big employers. So there's two real kind of high level use cases. One is employers that are trying to increase their level of accommodations for employees with disabilities, and or accommodate new employees with disabilities that they couldn't accommodate before. So that's ultimately where we license our software as part of an accommodation suite and combine that with a whole bunch of other things. The second is consumer applications. So video game companies and like big AAA titles that aren't accessible otherwise. Technology companies, things like Zoom that we're on right now, that aren't always as accessible as they could be. Financial services, we talked about banks, being able to bank and trying to convert that 13 million American adults with disabilities who don't bank because of digital accessibility issues into people who can manage their finances independently. And then healthcare providers. One of the interesting things that we've been starting to sort of study and understand is the impact of telehealth and the accessibility there. And so people with disabilities on average go to the doctor 4 to 5 times more than those without a disability. But that also requires physically going to a doctor's office, as none of the telehealth stuff is actually accessible.
Like, this makes it harder.
Yeah. And so many of those are like check-ins that are just checking a list of boxes and just giving updates, and they don't like actually require a physical presence. It could be done through a telehealth situation, like so many other things in the medical space are. And so finding ways to make that more accessible too are big focuses of ours. So ultimately, like, our buyers are streaming platforms, video game providers, banks, and medical companies.
I have an interesting question, just because I know some people in the web development space. I know this is like a front end experience, but have you ever given any thought to like growing it for the back end and helping developers make websites and things like that more accessible on the visual side? Or is that so completely out of your wheelhouse that?
So you mean like when you say front, you mean like a user controlling, and that's sort of our focus versus like perceiving information?
Yes.
Yeah, it's something we've talked about a bit. One of the things that I challenge a lot when it comes to trying to create a point solution for accessibility on providing information is it's where so much attention is, and so much of it is bad attention and focus. Like things like the classic overlay, builders that people in the disability space have so many challenges with, all the way to um, screen reader support and trying to automatically create new levels of support for screen readers on websites. I know it's a challenge that developers face because I've faced it in my past as well. But the actual best solution is to learn about creating accessible content and empowering content creators to create accessible content. That being said, it might be in our future to take what we're doing on our machine learning side and create easier pathways to it. But I don't think there's a point solution for, at least not in the next 3 years, in terms of where AI is at right now,
Right.
to be able to just flip a switch and have your content accessible in terms of perception of data, so visually, audio or otherwise.
Understandable. Since you mentioned the next 3 years, where do you see Cephable in the next 3 to 5 years or so? What are some of your big goals that you're open to sharing in a forum like this?
So I'm a big fan of idealized design, and it's sort of how I focus my career and on our products and everything else we do with our goals. And if folks on my team here might be laughing because they always say like you're looking further ahead. Our 5-year goal as it is right now is to make these types of controls so ubiquitous that anyone can walk or roll up to a piece of technology and interact with it the way that works best for them. That is flat out our goal. It means I should be able to open up a laptop and use it the way I want to. I should be able to go to an ATM or go to a kiosk at a restaurant and order and provide that level of communication to that device the ways that work best for me, regardless of what that is. That's our 5-year plan. It's to get to that point and to make this sort of ubiquitous way of controlling tech step out of keyboard and mouse and physical switches and touch screens and into something that's a little bit more equitable. There's a lot of things to get there.
Yeah.
So
I'm sure you have it laid out, but I like hearing about what your goal is. That is such an ambitious goal, but it's a laudable one. Like that's such an exciting goal, and I'm really glad to hear that that's where you have your eyes focused. In the meantime, how can people access Cephable now? Is it just through your website, or are there other ways they can do so? And where else besides that can they go to find out more about your tech and what your company is up to?
So cephable.com, CEPHABLE.com is the website. From there, for individuals, there's literally one of the header links says for individuals. It's got downloads, it's got all of our tutorials and video and written and visual content. It's got the companion app links, it's got use case links, it's got a whole collection of profiles that you can use out of the box that are all there. So you don't have to start entirely from scratch, and you can sort of build around your own use cases and goals. Other than that, join our Discord if you're a user, and find ways that other folks are using it too, that aren't just like the Cephable on our website and on our socials, or our Facebook user group where people are sharing those concepts and asking questions. And then lastly, all our socials are just at Cephable, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, where we post all of our other things. And we're continuing to grow that. I see Alexa's in here as an attendee, who's our newer
Alexa's great
communications. She's amazing. So I'm sure there's going to be other places too, but yeah, it's just at Cephable everywhere. So,
and just so people know, because I think some people might not know what Discord is, it's essentially a message board online platform and like community with a bunch of different sub communities.
Yep.
Just so you know, because I wouldn't necessarily hear that word and think community, and yet
it's kind of the opposite. Like it tends to be a little more focused in the gaming space as a platform like Discord, but people use it for sorts of things, and it's a good community hub that we have. So different like channels. Think of it almost like if you've used Slack, it's like Slack but free and for like open communities.
Mhm.
Or if you've used like Teams, like you can jump into channels and ask questions, you can post stuff, you can jump into voice chats and share things. And so we have it set up where you can like share profiles, and there's a place dedicated to that. There's a place if you need help to ask questions, get support from our team right away, get support from other folks in the community. Also just like share and talk about what you're doing and how you're using your technology.
I love it. I do. I just, the name of it always just makes me laugh, but I appreciate that it's such a robust resource for the community in so many different ways. My last question is just, is there anything else we haven't covered that you would like people to know about Cephable?
No, I mean, I think we covered a lot of stuff.
We did. We did, but I just wanted to
I
make
got on
sure.
my soapbox about the market and how assistive tech is sold. We shared a whole bunch of stuff about how the platform works, and
Yes.
no, I think that's great. I'd say the only thing is try it out and let us know, what works for you and what doesn't. Especially like I said before, like we want to hear from you if you're trying it or if you're working with folks that could benefit from it and they're trying it. Because we want to continue to improve it and really just make it that ubiquitous way that we control technology and to fulfill that 5-year goal that we have.
Well, thank you so much, Alex. And thanks to everyone for joining us. Make sure to keep an eye on your inbox for more information about upcoming programs and ways to make a difference. We've wrapped season 2 of our Changing What's Possible podcast, so check out all the episodes to learn even more about how we're bringing tech to life and making accessibility accessible. Enjoy the rest of your night. Take care, everybody.